How is our many-layered strategy for success and well-being for meeting our needs constructed? Well, the psyche is like an onion. We begin in infancy, and this is the core. The 1-year-old, the 0 to 1-year-old infant. And the 0 to 1-year-old infant has a learned strategy, an instinctive, unconscious, but learned strategy for meeting its needs. It may be, before birth, laying and enjoying in the womb. Now, the strategy that we develop, we put out all different types of patterns. We're quiet, we're noisy, we don't move at all, we move a lot. And animal scientists show this, that if you give a bird food after it taps its beak 3 times, it starts to have a superstition, a wondering that if I want food, maybe I have to tap my beak 3 times. And if the pattern is consistent, pretty soon the bird taps its beak 3 times, waits for the food. And if the food was delivered when the bird stretched its wings or went for a fly or sat here or, tapped this, if the bird can discover the pattern, if the rat can discover the pattern, it reinforces that particular pattern. And the patterns that were rewarded in infancy, in a completely dependent relationship, it's very important for a new being to learn what its environment rewards. And so maybe screaming in an inattentive, overworked family, screaming could be the best pattern for meeting the needs in the child. So we develop, you have a need, scream. That becomes the 1-year-old template. Now, the 2-year-old template, a couple of things may happen. Maybe the parents evolve an immunity to screams. They just tune it out. It's happening too much. Maybe the parents put you in a room. They can see you're old enough, you're not going to die. So if you're going to scream, you're going to go to a room. So the 2-year-old develops a new iteration, a new adaptation of the pattern of meeting its needs. Maybe it explores, and if it explores enough, then it finds a person who will hold it or find some food, etc., or some diversion. So the 2-year-old's pattern is to try different things and explore. But around maybe age 3, maybe age 4, maybe age 5, the parent is now holding the child more accountable. So if the child explores and a vase top tips over, the parent probably isn't going to hit a 2-year-old. But maybe this exploration meets with a backlash at age 3 or 4. And then the new dictate is do what you are told. Now you can understand language, and I'm telling you to do this, and if you do this, you'll be rewarded, and if you do not, then you will be punished. And maybe that boundary is tested, and there's physical violence, humiliation, etc., directed at the child, until the child resigns itself to the new guidance system, which is to do what the strongest person in the room says to do so that you don't get hit. Now, that works for a while. But then let's say the parent starts to exploit this. Go do your homework, go do this, but there's no time, no, shut up, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And the child realizes they can't win. No matter how many things they do that they're told, they don't get to play with their friends. So the doing what you're told strategy isn't working. So a new layer of the onion is formed, a new identity. An identity is a simple pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And the identity that is formed is ultimately the identity that is most successful and available to the individual in a given environment. You see, in a different environment where the infant was held presently and given breast milk and attuned to, maybe they never developed the exploration identity because they didn't need to explore. Maybe they didn't develop the screaming identity because they had such an attentive parent that they developed the rhythm and they didn't have to scream. They were prioritized. And so they just develop a blissed out present identity, a little Buddha, with a incredibly competent environment and loving mother. But going back to a more probable scenario in a parentally illiterate culture where parents have children without a single formal hour of training in many cases, and in many cases, any psychologist could say there's a 95% chance that you and you together will absolutely destroy the well-being of any person of innocence that you bring into your life. Do not have a child, but we do not require permits, training, or competency to be a parent. And so, when the parent exploits the do this and then do this and then do this and then do this, and there's no space for the enjoyment of the child, maybe they try running away and lying. So they develop their new lying. But they're not very good at lying, so that comes to a quick end because now they're being hit for lying, given lectures on what a bad person they are for lying. And so the lying isn't working. They can't win doing what they're told. Can't go back to screaming. That's now publicly embarrassing. So now they develop the new pattern of energy, which is sulking. I'm not going to defy. I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to commit a hittable offense. I'm just going to sulk and make my displeasure known by going as slow as possible, answering as briefly as possible, being disengaged, and generally making it known that I'm miserable. Now, if the parent starts saying, "Oh, what's wrong? And what do you need?" "Well, I need this." "And you'll stop sulking if we give you an hour of playing?" "Well, now you have, we'll do what you're said to do, a certain amount of the time, then we'll sulk, then we'll have an hour to do what we want to do." And the sulking identity is born. But then you start hanging out with positive thinkers, right? You don't want to hang out with negative people. You want to hang out with positive people. And suddenly, when you want something and you sulk, then they say, "Oh, that's negative. You can't be negative. You have to be positive." And then you get what you want. Yes, you be positive. Well, I was very positive, and my boss still didn't give me a raise. I was this and this, and so then comes the cynic, right? It never works out. What's the point? Whatever. And the thing to understand in the evolution of the psyche is the needs stay the same. The human needs to survive, to feel secure, love and belonging, self-esteem, etc. They're always the same needs. But in different environments, in different points, different strategies allow us to fulfill our needs differently. Now, when we are shocked or traumatized, when we are triggered into a repressed and regressed trauma, let's say something happened at 3 years old around a car crash, and our car nearly crashes. And suddenly we're experiencing the world as a 3-year-old, where the trigger is taking us back to an unresolved trauma. Well, once we're 3 years old, we're back in the 3-year-old's coping strategy. What do? They crawl and explore, or they scream, help, help. And we go back to that strategy. Now, that strategy may or may not be the most effective in our present day to survive. It's just the strategy that a regressed 3-year-old knows to do. It worked for the 3-year-old. We're now coming back into that inner age. And so let's try that. It's not a conscious decision. It's a reflex. So we can regress to any point in our past. And the other thing to understand is that these layers of an onion or layers of a tree are all part of our personality and our psyche. Meaning we always have the probability of regressing. If the way that we learn to bond with a human being was to cling tightly because our parents were relatively inattentive and unattuned, and the only way to feel safe was to cling to them. They were not attentive, otherwise they drifted off and forgot, oh, you're overheating in the car. I forgot. I was so busy talking with my girlfriends. I see. So the child learns a clinging protocol, a clinging template to have some sense of safety. Well, if you want to form an attachment with a new human being that's meaningful, the template was formed as a template. That's how you do it. In a culture that is psychologically illiterate, that does not re-examine the different strategies and never consciously talks about them, you do what you learn how to do unconsciously, and you do it again unconsciously. And so if you want to form, you have to go through the clinging template. I've got to cling to you. And after I cling enough, if you're present with me, then I'll relax and I'll grow up to maybe 7, where I play with you. And then if my playful part is welcome and accepted, then I become a passionate, sensual explorer at age 12, and we can play in that domain. But if you reject and why are you so clingy and needy? Now I become an infant, 2 years old. I desperately need, and I don't know how to connect with mom, right? Because the tools, the technology, which is an identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, that's there in a programmed form. That technology isn't working, and so our needs are not being met. Our needs for love and belonging, for whatever it is, for pleasure and whatever it is that we're pursuing at that time. The technology available to us of looking down and feeling ashamed and embarrassed, that's not leading to nurturing. It was as a child, as a 2-year-old, we looked down, we looked scared, and mom said, "What's wrong? How can I help you?" So that worked at 2 years old. And that's the template for expressing interest, to wander in the kitchen and see if mom notices me. But now I want some love. I want mother's love again. And I come up and I look down and I look a little bit of ashamed, and nobody's coming over to help me. So my 2-year-old is rejected, but that's the only technology available to me. See, those templates are still there. You can pour energy and they'll take that mold at any given point. Now, if you look at this, if you cut a tree in half, you'll see this pattern, right here, the rings, all that. And the outer rim of the tree is the living portion of the tree. That's the part that's alive, and that's this year's growth. And that's necessary, otherwise it's a dead tree. It's continually giving new layers. But the shape of the outer layer follows the mold of the inner layer. If this tree got struck by lightning, a traumatic event, at age 7, the ring around age 8 forms a scar around that area of the burn. And the next ring, and the next ring, and the next ring. Or if a tree was topped, and you'll see the echo if the tree leaned off to one side, because at age 2, the light was all coming over here. And by age 10, the light was still going there. And then a tree was cut over here. Now the light's coming from here. The tree starts to straighten. But the part that first grew crooked always stays crooked, right? And a new layer forms around it, a new adaptation to the new environment. Sometimes if there's a lot of water, the tree will grow very rapidly. If there's a drought, it will go very slowly. And you can see the rainfall in the rings of the tree. If you look at this ring of the tree, this one is a different measurement, in width than this one and this one. They're different thicknesses because some years were good years, plenty, and other years were scarce years. And that is recorded in the body of the tree. Now, in The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk talks about the psychological growth of a human being and that the body records the different records each step of the way. So, what happens when a new opportunity enters our life that we've never experienced before, a surprise, a shock? Well, one of the things that may happen is we may regress to a different age. When we are disoriented, we lose the coherence of the present identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that's working for us right now. When a lot of new and unfamiliar stuff comes towards us, we don't know how to respond. And so the present identity can lose its coherence. What we will anchor to is a strong, hopefully successful past identity, a place that we know who we are. Maybe it was 5, I'm really stubborn and no one's going to move me. And that was a really good anchor point. Like anytime I didn't know what was going on, I'm just not going to budge. And that's my anchor. So it's an anchor identity within the history of the psyche. And if you're shocked and disoriented, you may grab for an anchor identity. That may be 5 years old. Now, it's a good anchor if it's solid, if it can't be budged. And the goal is to find yourself, to find a new pattern that isn't shattered easily by what's going on. It may be a completely destructive identity, though, if what is called for is a creative presentation, and you were shocked and you've gone into, I'm not budging, I'm not thinking, I'm not going to change anything, and nobody's going to tell me what to do. And your boss says, come on, let's have the presentation. And you say, no, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it. And your boss just says, you're a dysfunctional employee. I'll give the job to somebody else and the promotion and all that. And it's like, no, I want that. But then you can't respond with a 5-year-old anchored identity of I'm not budging. You have to respond with the identity of I'll go do it, and how about this, and how about that. That's a different identity, right? So the identities that are set in these templates as a child, they don't change. What changes is so you have the reaction, and those are all there in the template. And then you have the proaction. You have the reaction. You can fight those. You can suppress them. That tends to amplify and intensify the focus on the identity to resist it. Or you can say, yeah, my 5-year-old is terrified. And I accept the terror and welcome the terror of my 5-year-old. When you love and accept a part of this inner ring, it releases you. If you reject and attack it, it clings to you. It will not release you. It's like a binding hook. It opens with warmth and tightens with coldness. So the colder you are with self-hatred and scorn, the tighter the hook that attaches to it becomes. And so, a blossom opens in the sun. What your job is as a present-day adult, as new energy comes into you, it comes in through this hole in the center. and it slowly works its way through out to the present moment. And if you understand, empathize with, accept, and love, oh, thank you, 3-year-old, for screaming so that I'm still alive today. That worked for you, and I'm alive because you screamed. Good job. Thank you. I don't need you to scream in my meeting or at my spouse, but you did a really good job with screaming at 2 years old. Good job. Keep it up. And you know, I've got it, 2-year-old. I have a better plan than screaming and being fired and all that. And 5-year-old, you were really stubborn, and I may even go back to some of that. You really know how to refuse to be told what to do. It's quite useful sometimes. Thank you for that. Now I have a little bit more autonomy and uniqueness in my life because I didn't copy what other people did. So thank you for this. And my 7-year-old, you sulked until you finally got them to back off and you had a few hours of play in the day. Good for you. Sulking really worked. And then and 10-year-old, you were a good student and you got praised and then you got benefits and that really worked for you. And sometimes I'll use that, right? But I've got it from here, right? And you earn the right to access the moment, to respond to the moment. You earn the right to that in the present day by accepting, understanding, and letting the energy flow through those different layers of templates out to the present moment, where you can look at all of those things and proactively choose a new thing based on the data. You know, this person doesn't seem like the type of person who would respond well to sulking. If they do respond well to sulking, come on out, 5-year-old, and sulk. You've got that down, and look, they're giving you what you want because you're sulking. Or you could say, you know what? They do respond to sulking. They're very manipulatable about sulking, and they don't respond to intelligence. If I sulk, they'll give me what I want. But if I intelligently present my argument, they're not moved by logic and intelligence. They're moved by sulking. And I don't want to sulk in order to get my needs met in this relationship. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say goodbye to the person who rewards me for sulking, and I'm going to find someone who says, that's a good idea, let's do that. And now I get to practice the new adaptation in my personality of producing rationales. I've done the calculations. This one is a 70% better idea for this reason. What do you think? And they say, great. It's like, good, I get to develop a rational partnering identity with a rational partner. And so I have all this infrastructure that got me to the present day. Now, you might think that this is, unimportant. In trees, it's called dead wood as a negative thing. Now, most of a tree is dead wood, if you call dead not the cambium layer of the tree. It's crystallized years ago, and it's not changing. The scars are not particularly healing. It's there as maybe 90% dead wood. But dead wood is not derogatory. You just look at the physics of it. If you were to take that tree and take all of the old wood out of the core of the tree from top to bottom and just have this little thin layer of cambium, as in a hollow tree, it will fall over in a storm. If you were to take all of your past identities and survival strategies and discard them. And I'm only going to be a spiritual, loving person in the moment who's rationally looking at this, and that's all I know how to do. And if I meet a sociopath coming at me with an axe, I have no idea what to do because my current identity is not formed with that. It's not what I didn't have to survive sociopaths coming at me the way my 5-year-old did when my older brother was bullying him. He's got a strategy around that. Run. You say, welcome, brother, and get, lopped off with an axe. Now, each of these inner layers has a purpose in different functions, can tell us things. That person's lying. I had to learn who was lying because they always lied before they abandoned us. They always lied. So I had to learn so I know who's lying, says the 7-year-old. That person is lying. Don't believe him. I know who's out to get me and do this, says the 15-year-old. I know that. And I know how to avoid that, says the 16-year-old who learned from the 15-year-old, right? I know how to deal with these different situations. Now, the trick is to have a collaborative relationship with these parts. Gee, I'm finding myself 5 years old. Don't do it again. Don't do it again. Oh, you've ruined it again, 5-year-old. No, the 5-year-old did not ruin it again. The 5-year-old provided the best available template that you've developed, meaning you haven't done your job to form a new template, which means that the culture hasn't done its job to teach you a new template. It rewarded this template. It didn't teach you a new one. It didn't teach you the science of psychology, of the psyche. So you don't know it. It didn't teach it. You don't know it. So there's a shared incompetency between the individual and the culture that gives rise to the individual. So it's our job to develop better strategies than anything that has worked before. Now, if one of the earlier strategies worked before and we're fine reverting to that or regressing to that's fine. I feel like a 2-year-old, bouncing around, doing this, doing that. And I'm fine with that. I like the feelings. So I'll just be 2 years old for a bit. I'm in an appropriate place where I can giggle and play. And that's working for me and nobody's minding. Okay, so you've got that template available. Energy flows through these patterns, and if we witness it and allow it, comes into the present moment, where we get to have the honor, the power, the responsibility, the ability to decide what happens to it. How do we respond? And it's a little bit like the story of Sleeping Beauty. Because what often happens is some part of the psyche is not invited to the table, is not given a seat at the table. It goes into the bag, it goes into the shadow. And that part is pissed. That part is buried in the shadow of the self, in the shadow of the cult or culture, and doesn't like being buried. So we curse the denied parts of self by burying them, by not inviting them to the table and honoring them. That's our curse towards a part of ourself. And it usually mirrors what the parents and what the cult curse. The parents and the cult curse some part of us. And every time we bring this part of us to the table, our parents curse it. Go away, go to your room. I don't want to see that. That's not who we are in this family. Okay, I guess I better ask this part, please don't come to the table because then I get sent off. Well, this part isn't very happy about that. So the denied and repressed parts of the self respond by cursing the psyche with sleep. It's the story of Sleeping Beauty. The uninvited relative, the uninvited guest, casts a spell on Sleeping Beauty and says, you will sleep for 100 years. Meaning if you want to bury a part of yourself, then all of you is going to sleep in denial of some part of yourself. And that sleeping part is still there. It's active. It's affecting you. But you don't get to see and understand why, because you refuse to honor it at the table. So it curses, it sends a rebound on the curse. You curse it by burying it to protect the cult from things it doesn't want to deal with. And it curses you with sleep, with denial, with absent data, and you go to sleep for 100 years. Now, the subsequent relative, the last relative, the godmother, the fairy, right, cannot undo the curse. But what she can do is work around it. You may or may not be able to undo the curse that says that every time I fall in love, I feel 2 years old and start getting needy and desperate. That's the template that's there. And it may never change, particularly if it's met with contempt and abandonment, which just amplifies the neediness, right? So you're in this loop. But what the present day self, the new forming identity, can do is say, yes, there is a desperate, needy part that's 2 years old. There is a 5-year-old that is pouting. But I can add to the mix a sense of gratitude and hope for the future. That's the new identity that wraps the old layers of identity in a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. That I accept who I am and how I came to be. That I understand why my 5-year-old is so stubborn. And maybe I can take my partner into the narrative. You have no idea what my 5-year-old had to deal with. Here's what he had to deal with day after day after day. And this was his strategy. This is how he survived. And now you're sounding a lot like them. And my 5-year-old isn't going along with it. Is not going along with it. If you want to negotiate with my 5-year-old, he wants this and this and this. You want to talk? No, you want to bury that. Okay, well, you don't get him as an ally. Now, this is very important when it comes to a marriage or a relationship of any kind, because your partner over here has the exact same complex layer. Now, the 1-year-old in me may get on well with the 1-year-old in you, good, but the 2-year-old in me may hate the 5-year-old in you. So when I go to 2-year-old and you go to 5-year-old, we do not get along well at all, because your 5-year-old pouts and wants someone to take care of them, and my 17-year-old is tired of taking care of children, and I am not going to be manipulated into doing something that is not my job, says the 17-year-old. And the 5-year-old pouts some more. Someone take care of me. And the 17-year-old says, go fuck yourself. I'm going to go do what I want. And the 5-year-old says, this is not a good marriage for me. I'm not going along. Get out of this marriage. The 17-year-old says, fine, good riddance. And then the 3-year-olds that got along well together, or the 20-year-olds, suddenly, what happened? Why don't we want to spend time together? Well, the 5-year-old and the 17-year-old had a fight. They don't get on very well. So a marriage, to the degree that you are married to yourself, is to the degree that your present identity sees, understands, empathizes with, attunes, and loves all of the other inner rings of the tree. That's a good marriage with yourself. If your present self is on good terms with your 1-year-old, and good terms with your 2-year-old, and good terms with your 3-year-old, then your 3-year-old is going to like and cooperate with your present self. Your present self can say, hey, 3-year-old, is this a fun person to play with? No. Okay, well, we'll find someone else to play with. Good. Is this a fun person to play with? Yes, I like this person to play with. Okay. We'll we'll make some time for them. Good, says the 3-year-old, right? You're a good daddy, right? You're taking care and you understand my needs. Now, you're then in a loving relationship with most of yourself. You're integrated. There is a rapport. But you can then the question is, how well married are you with your partner? Now, you may love your own 1-year-old, but if you have contempt for your partner's 1-year-old, what a loser. Well, the partner's 1-year-old doesn't want to be in relationship with you. Partner's 1-year-old is always telling the present partner, get out of this relationship. They're boring. They're horrible. Get out. Or you may have a great relationship with the present moment of your partner who thinks you're wonderful and successful, but your 5-year-old says, it's so boring. Get out of this relationship, right? And so the cohesiveness, to the degree to which you are married, is the degree to which each of your inner ages and each of the inner archetypal expressions within that age get on with one another. So the degree of self-love goes from almost nothing to complete integration and acceptance, and the degree of love for another and or marriage is not about a contract or a piece of paper. It is about the real chemistry, actual mathematical chemistry of how the different strategies of each of these different parts connect. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.